And hello everyone, welcome back to another HTML tutorial. So in the previous tutorial, I showed you the basics of using templates in Flask. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to expand on that and work with incoming requests in Flask. Alright, so let's create two new HTML files. This one I'm just going to clean up. And the first one I want to call form, because this would be like a form you would send in once you completed, like with your username and password, for example. And we can just say form, and this can be have a post method, and its action can be /completed. Now this action will just make it go to the /completed link on your website, like how we've been working here. It will just go to /completed. That's what action will do. And it will send any data it has to that location as well. And it will be a post method. And post, we'll get into that a little bit later. But essentially, post is for sending secure data that you don't want others to see. This data will be like passwords and maybe any user sensitive information. You also get, which we'll also get into, which is allowed for less sensitive information, like just the username or something like that. If you're ever unsure of which to use, just default to post. Cool. You can then create two inputs, and the first input will be of type text. The second will be of type password. And then we can also create a button that is going to be of type submit, and it will just say submit data. Now we need to give the inputs a name, because this name will store the values later on, and you'll see what I mean. So name, and here we can just say, oh, that should be name, not Bane. Name is equal to username and then password. Cool. And just to make it look good as well, we can just use BR. Okay, so this is just how it looks. Once you've done that, you can Ctrl-A, Ctrl-C to copy it and create a new one called search.html. And this will be an example of where you don't necessarily pass in bad information, like that others shouldn't see, but just want to search something up. So we can also make it go to completed, but instead of a post method, we use a get method. And we only need one input, and this can also just be username, and we can just say search. Take note, this button type is important. If your button is not of type submit, it might not try to submit the form. Cool, so it's just two very basic forms, one using post, the other one using get. Nice. Now let's first render the templates. So here we can say define form, and this form can just return render template form.html. So the form we have here. Let's make sure that works. So if we refresh, we get our form, the username and the password. We can create another route for search. There we go. So let's test it out. There we go. Nice. Now let's create another route at route, or at app, dot route. And this route will be the /completed route. And it will take in methods of both post and get. Now when you specify methods, it allows you to say what methods this route is allowed to take. For example, sometimes you only want the get requests, other times you only want post, sometimes you want both. If you specify it here, then it will allow both of them in this scenario. By default, it only allows get requests. Now let's quickly explain the actual difference between get and post. So here in get, if I were to say test, search, then you'll notice it says username is equal to test. A get request will put the data inside of this URL. Alright? But if I were to go to the form and I were to enter some data, then it will just go to completed, because the post data probably gets sent in something that's called the request body. You don't have to know what that is, so I'm not going to really explain it. That's for a much later tutorial. But that's the main difference. With a GET request, all of the information is displayed inside of the URL. So if you put in a password and you send it with a GET request, then anyone with that URL will know the password. So you don't want to send sensitive information that could be used in a negative way in a GET request. In a POST request, you can. GET requests are best for when you basically want people to see the same data by copying and pasting a link. For example, if someone searches up cooking on a searching website, if they were to then copy that link and send it to a friend, and then that friend can copy that, click on that link, and then also see the same search results, then a GET request is perfect. But it's insecure. With a POST request, that is not usually doable. You can't quite copy the URL with that query or data you put in and send it to someone and they will have all of the same information. Instead, it will all be packaged safely inside of a body, a request body. So POST will be more secure because then not everyone can use that same information that is inside of the URL. Okay. And yet again, if you ever wonder, just default to POST then. If you're never sure which one to use, just default to POST, or just use GET until you figure out, oh wait, this should probably be a POST request. Anyhow, we can then say define form completed, and this right here, we can just do a few things. First, we can print request.path, and request is importable, so request. Once you've imported it from Flask, you can just use it here like it's nothing. And then print request.method. And then of course just return hello, or whatever that is. Now, if we go back here, we enter in some data, then in our terminal, we get /completed because that is the request path, and then post because that's the method that's being used. If we were to go to search and use this method, then it will give this completed and then get. So you can use that to get more information. Now with that knowledge, we can now use this to determine if we're using a post or GET request to get here. So let's remove this part here. If request.method, if that is equal to a post request, then we want to go if request.form, and this will contain form data. In this case, we want the username, and this username is this right here, this name here, name username. This is being sent. So the request form contains a username that is equal to, and let's say it should be Jack123. And you can also check the password and say request.form and then password. So just take note, if this name was anything different, so anything other than password, this name here, then this should also be something different. And we can say that should be equal to pass. Okay, if that is true, then we can return an H1, and usually actually return a template, but in this scenario it's not important, login success. And this will tell them that they have successfully logged in. And in here we can just return incorrect login details. Cool. Now let's try it out. So we go here, and let's actually just go to the home. And now the username is Jack, but let's put a different username in here with the correct password. Incorrect login details. Nice. Let's give it the right username, so Jack123 with the right password. Login success. because now we check if the username that's been passed into the form is this, and if the password that's been passed into the form is this. If it is, then we return that. You have created a very basic login system right now. That's actually pretty epic. Now we also want to check else, and this would be if it's a GET request, but you could also specifically check for a GET instead of a POST. But otherwise, if it's not a POST request, we can do a GET request. If request.args.get, and this is to get details from a GET request, because this will get it from the arguments passed in here. So if we go to search, yeah, that's not how I spell search, and we pass in something here, then this right there, that's an argument. So here we should go request.arguments.get, and we want to get the username passed in. This doesn't have to be the username, it could be something else. Anything that you put in here, so this there, that doesn't need to be username. And we can check if that is equal to Jack. Then return user Jack has 200 followers. And of course, if it's not Jack, we can just return user not found. Cool. Let's try this out and then I'll explain it. So here we can say Jack, search. Oh, user not found. Oh, that's a capital J. Let's make that lowercase j. There we go. Now we just refresh, we'll see user Jack has 200 followers. Okay, now if we try Mike, user not found. Isn't that absolutely epic? We've also just implemented a basic search. Now anyone that goes to this link will see the same data. But if anyone goes to this link, but in a POST request, they will not necessarily see the same data. So let's go over what we just did. So first we created a route to render our form and our search. So just these two basic HTML components. Then we created a route for where they go after they've completed implementing or entering this form data. If the request they used was a POST request, which is determined here, so that method, post and get. If it's a POST request, which would be this one right here, then we check if the username passed in from the form is this Jack, and here there's the username and whatever is passed in here. And if their password that has been passed inside of here, there we go, is equal to pass, then it will return them this. Usually if it's not this, you should go and return something here as well, but in this scenario we just return this by default, because you should always try and return something from a route. In this case, we put something at the very end to make sure something gets returned. Cool. If it's not a POST request, so if it's a GET request, then we go here and we say if the requested argument username, so we're saying if /completed and then username, if that is equal to Jack, so if we get this, then we want to return this. Otherwise, if we don't get this specifically, we want to return this, user not found. And if it's not a GET or a POST request, then return this, which usually it would be either a GET or POST request. And also, if this POST request failed, then also return this. You could have easily done this as well. This would have been perfectly fine. Of course, it should just be indented a bit. And you'll notice that this is blurred out because this will never actually happen. So now we can remove that. And this will be perfectly fine as well. It will give the same results. You could also use an else if you don't want to use just an if statement. So you can just go if else and then do that instead. But yeah. And that is the basics of working with requests. It might seem like a lot of information to process, but Flask made it very easy because there's actually a bunch of requests like patch, put, delete, all of these requests. But they made it easy and only allowed two requests, post and get. With these two requests, you can send secure data and insecure data. Data that once entered, that somebody else can just copy the link and go to that same page with the same data. And then data that's insecure, that if someone copies that link, they can go to that same page with the same data on that page. And basically, we're still wondering what's the difference between post and get. Post is to send passwords and any other information that might harm the user if it came out. A GET request is used to send search queries or just lengthen the URL or anything like that. Just send information via the URL. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next Flask tutorial.